It's Monday, December 12th, 2022. I'm in this. I watched this morning, there was a NASA announcement on the CBS. And I'm thinking, going over yesterday's discoveries, I took Anthony for pageant rehearsal. He was asked to be in the pageant next week. So I'm recalling that while we were there, not just at service, but there was time just standing around, and Anthony brought me to a section of the church that I don't normally stand in. I mean, again, when you go to a foreign city or a foreign something as a tourist, it's you are used to almost inspecting the buildings, inspecting the architecture, the flair, the flavor, it's all of the visual sensations of travel that become expected almost. I think I don't know how or why there's such a break in reality that when it's a hometown close building, one doesn't just automatically do the same. However, he took me to the back of the church. He wanted me to read him something because the calligraphy art of script on the enunciation was in such a way his eye couldn't discern what it was, and he asked me to read it out loud to him, so I did. I noticed, and then we went into the vestibule, what I would call the vestibule, perhaps the foyer of the church, and there was a proclamation on the wall, which I had never seen before either. So we stood there. He asked me to read that to him, which I did. It was interesting because it not only mentioned or referenced June, it was a proclamation under the administration of Michael Bloomberg. And it was Zion's beginning. It had a 2005, became Zion Episcopal Day. 2005. That's the star birth year of the Prince of Peace, which is what they refer to this special relationship between Mary and the special star child that Mary has in whatever Mary in a 4-letter pattern equates out to in it's a collective consciousness, and it's put out in the public to share in this and worship this collective consciousness. It's part of perhaps the peaceful arrangement with management, the Lord's system, and keeping the people safe and in some orderly fashion, without too much intrusiveness. So there was the Prince of Peace 2005 recollection on this Zion. They also have on there 1830, just so Magic Escalator Company is fully aware of the reference to what things are built on in numerical values that are of utmost importance to a very small few gathering when discussing Star Wars and star systems. So there's that. I discovered yesterday. I took photographic evidence of it for visual art and I put it on my Facebook page. So that happened. And then later there was candlelight carols. And my father wound up coming with me. He put on his Santa hat. Um, and we went back, and the choir was, I mean, it is, first of all, I was so grateful for the invitation and the reminder that it was going on. But the sound of the live music in the small amp, like the acoustics inside of the building, and just the visual way they had all the candles out was really nice. I did, while I was sitting there, notice there was a small lighting differential where there was almost a strobe effect. I don't think it was intentional. I also heard a high pitch frequency from, I don't know which one of the electronics. Um, but again, that's my hypersensitivity, um, in whatever this is, in this portion of what I refer to, I suppose, as time frame, time capsule, in quantum abilities to leap, and also being trapped within this portion of broken galaxy. Um, so there's that. There was also a reference when I went to Sunday school yesterday, with Anthony, a mention of a very specific name, and Jonah. Um, Vatican put out on their calendar system a very interesting date, the date that my parents were married, their wedding anniversary date. Um, and Jonah and the whale having significant whatever. Um, and so I collected this piece of information yesterday of who they're saying, because they also mentioned something about Solomon, SOLO, break, MON, break in the word, because I've also heard it pronounced as Solomon. And when they pronounce it as Solomon, it takes on a totally different body. And that becomes a totally different conversation, totally different flavor and feel. But if we're talking about Solomon, as in a singularity of star, with no attachment whatsoever in a vacuum of time and space, it does not even have a discernible ability to grasp the fabric of time and space by hand metric on paper and pencil. Forget inside larger machines, because that solo should not even be up to that. I don't understand why the children of the star system that are birthed at star system fabric, anchored into fabric of time and space, so much more securely than others, like myself and like Alexander. I don't understand why we are not recognized at any level in a way where we are treated a certain way and cared for in a certain way, when that's what we bring into this reality, this realm, this environment and atmosphere, and this part of star system. He and I are a star system within our selves, which in quantum physics, in practical, not just in theory, but in practicality, brings about a whole nother level of consciousness, for which it is really hard to connect with other humans on this level. Like I mean, to, and then I don't know, it seems important in their theory but whether they recognize it enough or not in order to raise us up to where we need to be. And how do you circumvent getting around the King Herod ideology, um, of where they then see us as a threat and want to hurt he and I, when in fact my son, according to the Episcopalians, is Prince of Peace in their theory and ideology, um, for this special Mary Jesus, or Mary star and Jesus, and this quantifiable and explainable differential that is part and woven into the New York um, cosmic fabric. Um, I mentioned the that and that the church asked New Anthony to be 2012 to be Joseph in this play. And my son, I was having a conversation with Alexander, and Alexander's like, "You never took me to church." He says, "I don't even know." I was like, "Yeah, no, I know I didn't." I said, "However," I said, "between you've heard Jesus, Mary, and Joseph." And he goes, "Right." I was like, "So he's one of like the top three in that connection." I was like, "You know that. Great." So he got the part of Joseph, like one of the top three. That's important. And Alexander was like, he's like, "Yeah." He's like, "But I don't know anything else." I go, "You know, again, top three. That's it." So, so that was important. And then later, while we were waiting between the morning service and the candles and carols, there was Guillermo del Toro. He is, and I don't know, I think he's producer, I don't want to discredit him or not pronunciate him properly, but his name I remember, and he made this movie Pinocchio, um, handcrafted something or other. I don't know what that next word is. I cannot remember it. It's not easy in recall, but I know he did this handcrafted, which I watched he speak. I watched him speak on his own behalf about the creation of it, bringing the visual arts together. I found it very. First of all, we watched the movie and the symbolism in it. They put Geppetto in like the Dutch shoes. Um, they then had some very interesting other pieces of realm work, mythology that I don't even know in New York because they kept it from me. Like this Pinocchio, he calls himself a real boy. Interesting enough, every time he lies, I mean, again, it's almost the birth. Pinocchio is almost like the birth of the allowance of cinematography and that whole industry at its early onset before it grew into what it is now. With every time you tell a lie, the nose grows and the nosy grows, and then sprigs start on the family tree, and then more opportunity and possibility is one way to look at it. But then how far does it have to grow in this nose and this nosy before then it becomes a discernible problem for him to just even walk? Um, so there's that. Um, then there is, and that goes back to solo, um, probability, possibility, and again, I would need somebody like a mathematician at the level of Guido, Professore Guido from St. Dominic, in order to have that conversation. He's the only one sent into my field that I recognize as a mathematician. Um, he was certainly a different caliber, and he just he brought together from just a difference. I mean, it was noticeable, his professionalism when he came to class, um, and much admired from a chair of just knowing how different he was in training and way of being from the others. Um, Quiet admiration on my part, of course. Just quiet observer as I have been throughout most of my whatever. Um, so I watched this hand carved Pinocchio, different than animation, but again, I lack I mean, I watched Guillermo speak on it, or again, whichever, del Toro speak on it. So for me, I watch his professionalism. I'm trying to follow the new vocabulary, but something so simple for he. But for me, I have not been exposed to these lifelong lessons and picking these things up in the field because there's been no exposure to that level of artist or craftsman um, at visual arts. Um, and then Pinocchio, he winds up dying, but he's everlasting. And he goes, when he dies from the one realm, he goes into the in between and has to wait for the sands of time to turn. And this creature of the dark or of the deep, spatially deep, not of the deep oceans, not oceanic, but more celestial body. And I don't have a name for it because they didn't say it, and I don't know the backstory, from which he reached into that crypt to borrow that creature and put into his visual artwork project. Um, he had to stand before this body of in between death and life before he was then brought back into his body, which again, passage of time between the dream and the REM dream sequence, and then waking up in this dream sequence, which does not feel like my dream. I have not been here in any capacity that felt like a wonderful dream. Um, it feels like somebody else's science project that's gone horrifically wrong, is what it feels like here. Um, but at many facets of what could be considered scientific. Um, and only for the sense of I am an integral part of life cycle at a quantifiable level that super important people like echelon 1% knows about. Why are they not able to keep me into their fabric and held at a higher placement so I don't get trapped under the manifold of solo, of the singularity importance? Because in singularity, when they all group together in some mass quantity, they then find they become argumentative, and they consistently argue how they are so much more important than the pieces of star fabric in star systems. And for that, I find it incredibly, whatever, insulting. So, among other words that I rather not speak. So there's that. So I watched this Pinocchio. My father watched it with me, and then we went to this candlelight and carols, and with the congregation, and it was just so nice. I mean, my voice, I no longer sing like I used to sing. I have this very froggy raspiness in my voice. At one point, one of the doctors that I saw said perhaps a polyp. Again, it just goes to a physiological response to molecular and cellular degradation that's going on here. But again, it's multiple levels of toxicity for which I don't want to go into at the moment. That by itself is not fixing itself. And as I get older, it just seems to get worse and worse. And I can see the physical damage it's had on my appearance. But in really ridiculous singular stars, in where while I've been trapped here in New York, see, the thing about the 1% that has no blind spots. They just know things like magicians and magics and fortune tellers and prophets and so on and so forth is in quantifiable mechanics. They already know when these special children are arriving. They already know that these children are going to have these wonderful they know the then pared down special relationship and special child, mother child, on this special star system that's going to be generated. They know about birthing star systems. They know that these birthing star systems, when they themselves are born, at whatever level, whether they're in common world, whether they're at royalty, wherever they are inherently an important piece and fabric of the future. And they also know that they are incredibly desirable to the already majestic, because they are going to, one way or the other, whether left by themselves in the muck and the mire, or whether they're brought up to majestic and royalty level, they're going to produce their birthing star system. And leaving someone like that, I mean, it used to be unheard of. I can't believe that they actually accomplished this and that they allowed this to go on. That speaks to singularity of least important, pushing agenda and line items, line items, LINE, that should have never been. So that's why it is so confusing how my star system arrived and was not presented and formally paired in companionship and championship with the one that desired a female birthing star system. I know that there were callers, gentlemen callers, and I know there was interest, but I also know that somebody alerted me there was some underlying war between Bavaria and Prussia, whatever that means, while I was while I was being held in the Glen, and while I was coming into my season for starting to have children and for relationship. And that's a problem. I don't understand why there was any even possibility other than the exacting direct result of what was needed and what was desirable. So that's a problem. But I don't know at what level was able to accomplish this. This morning I see NASA speaking of Artemis and having a mannequin on a rocket called Artemis 1 that they they shot up and they took all these pictures of the moon in all this grandiose whatever, in preparation for some other mission that they're going to actually put a live human or a live being into. Um, so I'm going to reference that within this in order to pair it with what's functioning in the human world at some level that then has a say to the artistic allegory that that is I'm able to reach at the only level of shoestring intelligence. I'm not quite sure. Is it human intelligence? Is it shoestring intelligence? Again, I don't know. Some form of artistic compilation of some sort. All right, this is coming on. They're announcing this NASA thing. So I can see that they spend an incredible amount of money, not only at like Brother Brady level with sports, and then now this new soccer that they're doing, which they call football. I see them putting on this World Cup, building these massive stadiums in these like far away from America. And I'm like, great, okay, so that's their money, their whatever. They're just alerting us to this because I'm in America. I have this quantum realm, really important birth sequence amongst humanity. And I see humans collecting and spending a lot of money on a lot of different things. But I still, in my 44th year, I am having trouble finding my place amongst man. Man has issued a letter saying that amongst the class I was in at the time, I was considered the god. I was representing the god amongst that class of children. This I understood. There was a letter that was read out to the class, signed, and then they collected it in manila envelope for wherever they collect those sorts of things. And so that's where I have not broken that reality. I don't speak on it in public for sure. Don't quite know, again, how to fit that into a conversation and if it's really relevant. Being humble, being one of the, like a quiet reserve. But I see them spending a lot of money and time and effort on these grandiose things, educating all sorts of non-Americans and Americans in some diplomatic format of keeping the peace. But yet, while they're able to accomplish all these great feats, all these great educations of each other, all these great symbolic gestures to one another, where they are still deficient and where I'm still deficient is finding this integrative piece of where do I fit in amongst men. I'm supposed to be star systems, and I don't know how to get to a single person that works at star systems. I don't even know what they call themselves. There's some agency that represents some American part of star systems being NASA, but who are they? How do you even get in touch with them? I don't know. I was being attacked by one of their level piece of equipment. And in the local trauma hospital, when you ask for their phone number or how to reach them, they then lock you up and send you through a series of institutions and observations at human level, which is even more frightening.
I was like, okay. That's doing my job, Nick.
Okay,
All
thank you.
So NASA says the success of the Artemis 1 mission means astronauts will be on board the next flight to the moon. The Orion capsule, with no one on board, splashed down in the Pacific Ocean yesterday near Baja, California. The 25-day test flight sent home some of the most amazing moon images we've ever seen. Mark Strassman has more on NASA's most ambitious lunar mission in half a century.
Splashdown.
Orion back on Earth.
After a textbook entry bringing its 25-and-a-half-day mission to an end.
Its lunar round trip over, but America's new chapter of deep space voyaging just beginning.
I don't think any one of us could have imagined a mission this successful.
And liftoff of Artemis 1.
Last month, this dramatic night launch began the Artemis 1 test flight. In all, a 1.4 million mile space voyage.
Now, to anyone else, that infinity loop that they just did with some offshoot, it's inside the infinity, and then there's like an extra little squiggle at the top. What does that really mean?
Sitting in the commander's seat, a mannequin outfitted with sensors. From deep space, Orion beamed back spectacular imagery of the moon and Earth. Twice, the capsule flew within 80 miles of the moon's surface. But the mission's biggest test came during Sunday's return. Orion slammed into the Earth's atmosphere at 25,000 miles per hour. The heat shield had to hold up against temperatures of 5,000 degrees, half as hot as the surface of the sun.
We're going to look at the data very carefully, but I would say very happy with what we've seen so far on the heat shield.
Sunday's splashdown, 50 years to the day after another landing.
Is the allegory and the shoestring budget that they got going on in New York, is that considered a heat shield? I'm just curious. I mean, like, in NASA terms.
Landing. Apollo 17 touching down on the lunar surface.
Hey, Houston, the Challenger has landed.
The last time, humans moonwalked. NASA wants to return now with the Artemis program. A crewed test flight around the moon in 2024, a moon landing later this decade.
It is the beginning of the new beginning, and that is to explore the heavens.
America's new era of moonwalking just took a giant leap closer. For CBS Mornings, Mark Strassman, Atlanta.
I still marvel, guys, that it can go up and it can come down and everything goes according to plan.
Yeah.
I still marvel at that. Coming up, there is drama at the World Cup. I know you.
So that happened according to the whatever. I mean, was I there? Did I see it with my own eyes? Nope. But they're saying that the timing technique is in line with what's going on now. So it is. So, and again, that goes back to part of this collective consciousness and where are they leading in a mirror paradigm where if you are in a mirrored hallway and then you break one of the mirrors ever so slightly, it changes the directive, and all of a sudden, instead of just seeing one, you see mirror, parallel universe almost in quantifiable, like mirror space, all looking identically the same, but almost in a pixelated, what is everybody doing on the exact same day at the exact same time, and watching how that shift. But again, that goes back into like forensics of a whole nother sort. So that's where I'm really having trouble with, is this, how are they affording and spending money on all of these solo birthdays from all around the world, and yet there was a star system that was created and was going to have a very special birthing star system, and yet that placement was not funded, was not sponsored, was not held in any high anything, and also was kept from being given to someone respectable in the sense of there was supposed to be some courting, there was some kind of agreement. I mean, that was done. And so that's why and there was an introduction between a family member and myself, being Nicholas. I don't know if that's just our grandsire's, our collective consciousness grandsire's name, but that we share. But that's what I was told to call he, which I did. Again, it gets really confusing when the names shift and change based on the mission and the objective and who gets a book or a update. And there are people who write the seen but unheard of publications. And I don't know how they organize themselves or what they call themselves, but I know they're a specific group or sort. I'm really having trouble, though, as a birthing star system without my family member to even just survive amongst all of this whatever. I mean, I don't even know how to fit in. I mean, this is not even logically, this makes no sense. This is just a gigantic signaling system of a much larger, more frightening, ongoing issue that seems to be totally unaddressed correctly. And I don't know it for what purpose. It's star 1978, star 8378, Nicole, Cattaruzza. It's Earth, solar system, Milky Way universe, galaxy is broken. And it's Bayside Station, Bayside, New York, 11361. It's like living in a time capsule, completely blind, looking for outside signals to try to orientate myself, since I already have this special timepiece. I mean, I bring time and space into dimension and focus into reality instead of some abstract theoretical concept just on paper. There's now a physical dimension to it in human body and appearance. And you can see the passage of time as goes from infancy into young adult, and through childhood, young adult, and so on and so forth. Except humanity has missed it completely and hasn't cared for it whatsoever. But yet it still exists here and it's going completely unacknowledged. Again, I see them acknowledging one another. The Golden Globes, Academy Awards, Tonys, Emmys, all these wonderful Nobel Prizes. I mean, all this stuff the solo birth dates get. Michelin Awards, that's one of the new ones I just found out about. But what I don't see is any attempt whatsoever or any ability to get me to where I belonged with family member Nicholas, who knows who I am. I may not know upon right away. I mean, it's been a whole childhood up and now 44 years into my life, and I don't know how much further. I'm pretty sure he was like right around the same escalator entry that I was. Just confused how humans can do such a thing when there really is hierarchy and importance at some level. And there's also been